The United Kingdom, a country with the most well-known monarchy, sporting heritage, iconic landmarks, not forgetting being home to the most spoken language in the world. A country most people have dreamt of residing in, for prominent university enrollment, or perhaps occupying a high seat in its corporate environment to brag about on your LinkedIn profile. What if I were to tell you the country is in calamity? Its governing party, the Conservatives, have been in rule since 2010, and as of the July 2024 UK general elections, they are on their way out. This was expected after the turnout of the May 2024 local elections, only coming in third behind the Labour Party and Liberal Democrats. This was due to raised concern amongst the country's population, stemming from precarious employment, the rising cost of housing, utilities, groceries, and economic insecurity, due to the GDP having grown by 0.7%, initially expected to only grow by 0.6% in the first quarter of this year, following 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. There are a lot of factors at play here. News outlets have not been shy from looking for a cause of these issues, and they mainly point back to one decision: Brexit, the United Kingdom's exit from the European Union. A decision that had a nation split in half, causing politicians to act in disarray. We witnessed the impassioned argument of Remain and Leave campaigners, as well as ordinary citizens, caught in the midst of uncertainty. Now looking 4 years after the official agreement, a vast portion of the population is left in regret and worried of the future of their beloved country. With a new Prime Minister and Cabinet, will this fear and uncertainty be addressed? We first need to take a look at the start of these issues and where the country may be headed. We'll be taking a look into the campaigners who called for an independent country, the reasons donors supported this, and why politicians are avoiding discussing this issue. Furthermore, the impact it's had on citizens, and more especially small and medium enterprise owners. Was this truly a bad decision? Was this one of the early steps into a revolution? We'll do the reading and investigations for you. You'll do the watching. We welcome you to Gauge Introductory, where we provide you informative abridgment forms. Thank you for joining us today. As always, background check and understanding first. What is the European Union? The European Union is a political and economic union consisting of 27 member states, located primarily in Europe. Its origins trace back to the end of World War II, where European leaders wanted to prevent future wars by creating closer association and economic integration among European countries. This was done with the goal of promoting political stability, shared values, and economic cooperation among its member countries. It primarily functions through intergovernmental decision-making, headed by institutions such as the European Parliament, the European Commission, the European Court of Justice, and the Council of the European Union. The UK joined the EEC, known by its full name as the European Economic Community, on January 1, 1973. The EEC is the EU's forefather. The UK's integration was caused by a referendum where a majority of voters supported membership, offering access to the European Common Market, as well as benefiting from investment opportunities and increased trade. Some more benefits included geopolitical considerations, which comprised of stability on the continent, strengthening ties with other European countries, and fostering peace. Now that you know what the European Union is, why would the UK want to let go of all of this? We're going to fast forward to the 2010s, where the current governing party, the Conservative Party, or the Tories, came into power. Driven by various ideological factions, including traditional conservatives, which is a political and social philosophy emphasizing transcendent moral principles, while nation conservatives, which is a strand of cultural, social, and political philosophy and ideology, which seeks to promote and preserve traditional institutions, customs, and values. Lastly, Thatcherites, named after former party leader and Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, relating to her political platform, policies, personal character, and style of management while in office. The party has generally adopted liberal economic policies, favouring free markets, including deregulation, privatisation, and marketisation, since the 1980s. The Conservatives have taken various approaches towards the European Union, with criticism of it as well as integration on the table. It has, to an increasingly less extent, pro-European factions within it. The then party leader and Prime Minister, David Cameron, had a lot on his plate when he came in. He was head of a coalition government with the third largest party, the Liberal Democrats, dealing with ongoing effects of the global financial crisis. Mr. Cameron's tenure has mixed opinion. He introduced austerity measures, aiming to reduce government budget through spending cuts while increasing taxes on the nation to recover from the financial crisis. He introduced the Health and Social Care Act 2012 to reorganize the NHS structure, which is constantly being updated. I've listed some examples of the changes implemented if you want to pause and read. This was all done under Cameron's Welfare Reform Act, which introduced large-scale changes to healthcare, welfare, stricter immigration policies, and reforms to education. Mixed opinion and controversy involving Cameron mainly stemmed from his austerity measures having implications on NHS funding for staff and services, as well as intervening militarily in the First Libyan Civil War, authorizing the bombing of the Islamic State. Unfortunately for Cameron, years on he faced pressure from members within his Conservative Party and the rival United Kingdom Independence Party, who were Eurosceptics. In other words, critics of European Union integration and policies. In order to address this issue, Mr. Cameron decided to pledge that he would hold a referendum on European Union membership if the Conservatives won the 2015 general election, in which they did, coming in first. Cameron proceeded to follow through on his promise. The European Union Referendum Act 2015 was introduced and passed by Parliament. Eligible voters across the UK and Gibraltar were given the option to decide whether the UK should remain a member of the European Union or leave on the 23rd of June 2016. Pro-Brexit politicians and campaigners promised financial contributions, where significant amounts of money could be used to fund domestic priorities such as education, healthcare, and infrastructure instead of the EU's budget. Secondly, sovereignty and control. Departing from the EU would grant the country control over its borders, laws, and immigration policy. Thirdly, trade and economic opportunities. The UK would be able to negotiate beneficial trade deals with global countries instead of being hindered by the EU's trade structures. Fourthly, national identity and sovereignty. Assert British values and independence on the global stage. And lastly, immigration control. Decrease the scale of migrants immigrating to the UK from EU countries by introducing a points-based immigration system and to prioritize skilled migrants based on economic needs. Out of the 33 million voters, 48.11% voted Remain and 51.89% voted Leave. A truly close call. Brexit was a reality. David Cameron had campaigned and urged for a Remain vote. However, prior to the referendum being held, he said he would work with whatever the outcome was. That wasn't the case. Since the Vote Leave vote was the majority, he was forced to navigate a future outside of his intended vision for the country he was leading. Therefore, he stood outside of Downing Street and announced his resignation as Prime Minister, a decision citizens criticize him for to this day. In came in Theresa May on July 13, 2016, the new leader of the Conservative Party and second female UK Prime Minister since Margaret Thatcher. Interestingly enough, she supported the unsuccessful Britain remaining in the EU campaign. Despite this, she came in determined to make a change and deliver on the promise of the Brexit voters, only beginning with the withdrawal process on the 29th of March 2017 by launching Article 50, a 6-page document issuing formal notice to the European Council of the UK's desire to withdraw from the European Union to allow departure negotiations to commence. Why did it almost take a year for the withdrawal process to begin? Well, on the 24th of January 2017, the Supreme Court ruled that the process could not begin without the authorization of the Act of Parliament, which unanimously voted against the Scottish Government's claim in respect of devolution. Let me first make the understanding of the Scottish Government's claim easier for you. The United Kingdom is made up of England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and smaller islands. Now, Scotland didn't want to leave the EU, although the vote for Britain was 51.9 to 48.1. Scotland's result was 62% to 38%, a vote to remain as the majority. As I have already stated, the Act of Parliament unanimously ruled against Scotland. The European Act 2017, which is the notification of EU withdrawal, empowered Theresa May to launch Article 50, beginning the withdrawal process. In April 2017, she ordered a snap general election with the focus of strengthening her hand in Brexit negotiations. This went south, however. She found herself in a hung parliament, meaning the number of her party seats reduced from 330 to 317. This forced her to enter a confidence and supply arrangement with the Democratic Unionist Party of Northern Ireland to support a minority government. Theresa May was in a very tough position. Not only did she have to negotiate a Brexit agreement that made everybody pleased, concurrently avoiding an exit without a plan, but she also had to deal with a deeply divided Conservative Party with pro-Brexit and pro-EU members of Parliament. She had to also focus on domestic issues, consisting of economic uncertainty, social inequality, public services, housing affordability, healthcare funding, and rising crime rates. Don't get me started on the terrorist attacks and scandals on the country during this period. She finally brought a new solution in July 2018, the Chequers Plan, officially known as the Future Relationship between the United Kingdom and the European Union CM 9593, a 106-page document. The white paper, however, was a 3-page cabinet agreement surrounding the sort of future the UK sought to achieve through the Brexit negotiations, which was divided into 4 chapters: economic partnership, security, cooperation, institutional arrangements. The plan aimed to hold the UK in a close relationship with the EU, stating that the new relationship be broader in scope than any other that exists between the EU and a third country. This would be done by establishing a new association agreement, which is a treaty between the European Union, its member states, and a non-EU country that creates a framework for cooperation between them. Areas frequently covered by such agreements include the development of political, trade, social, cultural, and security links. To conclude the association agreement with the European Union, you would need to exchange commitments to political, economic, trade, and/or human rights reform in a country. In return, the country would be offered tariff-free access, also known as tax-free access to some or all EU markets, which comprises of industrial goods, agricultural products, etc., and financial or technical assistance. Theresa May's Chequers Plan included continued access to the European single market for goods, and a common rulebook on state aid would be agreed, preventing either side from subsidizing their own industries. The UK had to also commit to maintaining high environmental, climate change, social, and employment and consumer protection standards. Former Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, also known as the Brexit Secretary, Dominic Raab, described the Chequers Plan as a detailed proposal for a principled, pragmatic, and ambitious future partnership between the UK and the EU. He also stated that the White Paper proposes a free trade area for goods to maintain frictionless trade, supported by a common rulebook and a new facilitated customs arrangement, but only for the rules that are necessary to provide frictionless trade at the border. This mentioned White Paper was finalised at a meeting of the UK Cabinet held at Chequers, the Prime Minister's country house, on July 6, 2018. The paper unfortunately left a bitter taste in the mouths of Brexit Secretary David Davis, as well as Foreign Secretary and future Prime Minister Boris Johnson, as they both resigned from their positions. This was when the House of Cards began coming down. Her wanting to retain a close trade relationship with Europe, meaning the UK would have to stick to the EU rules, is what is called a soft Brexit, which was not wanted. Theresa May's revolutionary plan was not only rejected by the members of her own cabinet, but also the European Union in September 2018. As mentioned earlier, she was determined to finalise this, so she didn't stop there. She brought the paper, or the Chequers Plan, to Parliament on 3 separate occasions. There, she managed to survive 2 votes of no confidence in December 2018 and January 2019. Sadly, versions of her drafted withdrawal agreement were rejected 3 times. On top of that, her party, the Conservatives, performed poorly in the European elections, as well as the United Kingdom local elections in May 2019, despite occupying first place. This would be accredited to Research Support Group, the European Research Group, a group of Conservative Party members of Parliament that were against the European Union as well as its integration. Realising the dead end she had reached, she too met reporters outside Downing Street to announce her resignation, officially leaving office on the 24th of July 2019. That's right, this was just too steep of a mountain to climb for Theresa May. Not only did a portion of members within her own party being against her, her attempt to deliver a Brexit deal that minimised economic disruption and maintained close ties with the EU was looked upon as a far-fetched dream. The question was, now what? Enter Boris, beyond belief, inconceivable, implausible, Johnson, former Foreign Secretary in Theresa May's government, succeeding her in the Prime Minister post. He came in with the political slogan "Get Brexit Done" and "Take Back Control" as a form of representation for him and the Conservative Party in the run-up to the 2019 general elections. In his first speech as Prime Minister, Johnson said that the United Kingdom would leave the European Union on the 31st of October, with or without a deal. He later declared to remove the May government Irish backstop from the withdrawal agreement, further announcing his desire to reopen negotiations. But he was unable to resume them, as the EU refused to accept his condition that the Irish backstop be removed. The purpose of the backstop is to ensure free movement and no physical border between Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom, and the Republic of Ireland, an independent country. This issue has a sensitive history, and evoking a border there could have caused uproar. Fortunately for Boris, after further back and forth debate in Parliament, United Kingdom and European Union negotiators agreed to resume regular meetings on the 28th of August 2019. On this day, Johnson announced that he had asked the Queen to halt Parliament proceedings from the 10th of September, reducing the time in which Parliament could block a no-deal Brexit and causing political tension in the process. Queen approved Johnson's request. Parliament was halted that day and was expected to remain that way until the 14th of October 2019. Protests ensued throughout the UK. The next day, on the 11th of September, Scottish judges ruled the pause of the UK Parliament sessions to be unlawful. Boris denied being dishonest to the Queen over suspension of the Parliament proceedings. Unfortunately for him, the Supreme Court later ruled unanimously that his suspension of Parliament was unlawful and therefore was ruled to commence once more. The United Kingdom and the EU ended up agreeing to replace the backstop decision with a new Northern Ireland Protocol on the 17th of October 2019. Parliament approved the agreement for further scrutiny, though they rejected passing it into law before the 31st of October deadline and forced the government to ask for a third Brexit delay. Luckily, Boris wasn't the only one frustrated by prolonged negotiations, as there was another gentleman advocating for the same desire. This is Nigel Farage, former leader of the United Kingdom Independence Party, and at this point, the leader of the Brexit Party. Just like both the names of the parties he has represented insinuate, he is a man all for European Union departure. He has been campaigning for this since the 90s. When he was still leader of the United Kingdom Independence Party, he managed to win 24 seats in the 2014 European elections. This was the first time a party, other than the Labour or Conservative, had won the largest number of seats in a national election since the December 1910 general election. He is the man who was responsible for pressuring David Cameron to call a referendum on EU membership in 2016. After stepping down as leader of the UK Independence Party in 2016, he remained a member of European Parliament, only to emerge as founder and leader of the Brexit Party in November 2018, after the negotiations for EU withdrawal had begun. He drew support from those angered with the delayed implementation of Brexit by Theresa May's government. The Brexit Party would win most votes in the May 2019 European elections, becoming the largest single party in the European Parliament, dominating the elections in the UK. Farage constantly voicing that EU membership undermined British sovereignty, democracy, and controlled over its borders assisted this. He presented Brexit as an opportunity for the country to regain independence and to arrange new trading relationships with countries across the globe, more importantly, addressing the immigration issue. The donors and the wealthy liked this idea of the regulated and independent country. The opportunities it presented in striking trade and business deals globally, as well as assuming the country would now be able to control its own policies regarding taxes, seemed mouth-watering. Although Farage successfully leading and securing votes for the party, who assisted him in establishing and financing all these campaigns? Meet Catherine Blakelock and Richard Tice. Let's begin with Catherine. An English nationalist, politician, financial trader, and former economic spokesperson for the UK Independence Party. She was actually the first leader of the Brexit Party, but was forced to resign in March 2019 after it was discovered she had made anti-Islamic and racist statements online. She was therefore replaced with Farage. Now, Richard Tice, a multi-millionaire English businessman and real estate tycoon, who has occupied various executive positions in real estate and asset management companies. He is the founder and co-chairman of pro-Brexit campaign groups Leave EU and Leave Means Leave. Leave EU was established to support the United Kingdom's withdrawal from the EU in 2016. Tice co-founded it with controversial businessman and political donor Aaron Banks, who has been accused or speculated to have conducted various unethical business practices. You can pause to see them all. He was previously ranked one of the largest donors to the UK Independence Party, as well as assisting Nigel Farage's campaign. Now, Tice and Banks are two of a couple of donors to the Brexit Party. Most of the funding actually came from numerous smaller donations through crowdfunding initiatives by individual pro-Brexit supporters. Clearly the party and initiatives were a success. The 2019 general elections came upon us and were held on the 12th of December 2019. The Conservative Party won with a majority of 80 seats, the nation having been swayed over to the idea of Brexit by continuous debates in Parliament, and notably, two very likeable and persuasive voices in media. All Boris needed was a parliamentary approval. The withdrawal agreement was approved and made on the 23rd of January 2020, and the UK officially left on the 31st of January 2020. That's right, the voices of Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson's party were just too influential.
From the constraints of the European Union, we once again will be able to find our place in the world.
Brexit, the giant screens declare in red, white and blue, we're out. 11 o'clock on the 31st of January 2020. One, of course, for the history books, but really it's the future that will determine whether or not this was the right call.
As we entered 2021, it was hard to notice the difference Brexit made to the UK, as the country was still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. We came across unfathomable news headlines, like the Partygate scandal expose regarding gatherings of government and Conservative Party staff during the pandemic, when regulations prohibited gatherings of this scale. As we approach the fourth quarter of 2021 and going through to the second quarter of 2024, the signals have went far beyond witnessable. Question is, did it actually benefit the people they voiced their promises to? Not at all. Well, at least thus far. Let's discuss business sides of the trade deal with the EU, which impacted various parts of the economy in different ways. The trade deal with the EU was supposed to include tariff-free trade, meaning imported goods were not to be taxed, as well as quota-free trade, meaning governments imposed trade restriction that limits the number or monetary value of goods that a country can import or export during a particular period, like it had been prior to Brexit. The literal quite opposite happened. The UK exiting the European Union single market and customs union brought new trade barriers, of which included tariff and custom checks. Brexit increased the cost of importing and exporting goods, as well as disrupted supply chains and created delays at borders. Sure, this didn't disrupt every single business in the UK. This affected the likes of retail and consumer goods. Notably, the UK is facing a food shortage, stemming from Brexit and climate change. In this example, we'll be focusing on the Brexit retail and consumer goods effects. Let me continue with the logistics aspect of it. A product that would be made available to all 27 EU countries would have a CE marking, which means the manufacturer or importer affirms the goods' conformity with European health, safety, and environmental protection standards. Now that the UK has exited the EU, UK products are only marked with the UKCA marking, which allows a product to be sold solely in the UK. A UK business needs to fill in additional paperwork for their products if they wanted to be sold in EU countries, which again, you didn't have to do before. In April, there was a rollout of Brexit checks in the importation of some foods, flowers, and herbs to the country, which had threatened the possibility of food shortage due to EU countries' outlook on the difficulty and extensive work of supplying the country. Most EU businesses involved in supply or distribution agreements with UK businesses have likely realized their product is not worth the delay of their business practices, so they enter into agreements with other EU-based businesses. The UK has also lost the benefits of value-added tax on products. Ever since its departure from the EU, it has since been viewed as a third world country. If your business exports to the EU, you have to have a value-added tax representative for every country you export into, not forgetting the costs and delays of affected inventory and availability of products primarily imported from EU countries. For example, if you're a farmer in the UK and your tractor broke down, you would likely need a new part. A significant portion of the time, it will be ordered from an EU country, like Germany for example. Instead of ordering and receiving it in like 2 days, it could take weeks to arrive, because the lorry carrying your part is stuck at the border behind another lorry that doesn't have the correct paperwork. To combat this issue, fortunate businesses have moved warehouses, distribution centers, or the overall headquarters to EU-based countries. The United Kingdom's National Health Service has faced its fair share of challenges and pressures over the years, comprising mainly of staffing shortages, backlog of care, financial pressures, and workforce morale. Well, with Brexit and the pandemic occurring around a similar time, the country has seen slower economic growth and rising cost of living, due to the supply chain disruption, currency fluctuations, and the increased cost of compliance. The demand for health services has in turn increased, but the supply of skilled workers has not matched that. Healthcare staffs have been suffering from burnout, trying to keep up with patient care backlogs, making enough to get by, and dealing with emergency care pressures from factors like knife crime. The UK has further needed to draw off separate certifications for the UK and EU markets. One noticeable industry is the chemical and pharmaceuticals industry, which has brought increased costs and complex agreements for drug approvals and distribution. The UK has had to re-register chemicals from the EU-UK agreement for a separate UK register, costing the country millions and even billions that could have been used to alleviate other issues. As I mentioned earlier, the UK has an immigration issue. 4 years since the delivery of the referendum, the issue has yet to be truly combated. The country has faced challenges of asylum seekers coming through the English Channel on small boats, numbers exceeding the 20,000 mark in 2021 and then rocketed past the 40,000 mark in 2022. This trend seems like it has slightly decreased. It is reported only 14,000 have crossed as of the third quarter of 2024. To address this issue, the UK has passed an immigration bill with Rwanda to send asylum seekers there. The UK has faced issues with labour shortages and recruitment in the construction, hospitality, tourism, transportation, agriculture, and previously mentioned healthcare. A study was conducted by Cambridge Econometrics called London's Economy After Brexit, Impacts and Implications. This revealed that Brexit cost London's economy £30 billion and that there were 290,000 fewer jobs in the capital in 2023 and thousands more nationwide. The country used to benefit from European Union labour enabling people to be in the country under free movement, though it has been voiced that this will be addressed by investment in machinery and development in high-skilled workers, but until then, this is an issue. United Kingdom university students have lost out on the Erasmus Plus program, which facilitated student exchanges and educational opportunities across Europe. The country introduced the Turing scheme as a replacement, bettering what was offered in the Erasmus program by supporting global study and work placement, though this program has been heavily criticized as it doesn't have the established partnerships and structure of the former program, but we presume it will be bettered progressing into the future. Lastly, there is a migration issue. EU citizens who were formerly in the UK for employment reasons, like the industries with the labour shortages, have either returned home or are seeking more stable opportunities elsewhere due to the more complicated and expensive visa and residency process. As time has went by, the UK has been perceived less attractive for investment, as well as for employment, primarily to their EU neighbours. There are many people, and I mean many factors we can blame for this issue. Most people who campaigned and voted for this are senior citizens of the country, who won't be around 10 to 20 to 40 years from now to see what they've caused. We could blame this man, Shankar Singham, who was considered the brain of Brexit trade relations and is regarded as one of the world's leading international trade and competition lawyer economists. In hindsight, he was one of few economists who thought this was a good idea. His certifications and alleged backing from hard Brexit donors, lobby groups, and think tanks reassured that Britain wouldn't face troubles losing direct access to the EU markets. This was assisted by his media coverage and a 150-page report in which he claimed that the repeal of EU workplace environmental and agricultural regulations would prove a major boost to the British economy. Debatable. We could blame this man, who actually signed the deal. After only being Prime Minister until 2022, he has often been viewed as the most scandalous premiership of modern times. From the already mentioned numerous parties he threw at Downing Street during the COVID-19 restrictions, to appointing Chris Pincher as Deputy Chief Whip of the party, whilst allegedly knowing the misconduct allegations against him. More than 50 members of his government have resigned due to factors like this. I don't think all that matters to him. I mean, despite all this, he is the most donated to Prime Minister and Member of Parliament. He's had his wedding sponsored. The alleged donations list does not end. He even put twice the number of Conservative Party donors in the House of Lords at twice the rate of any other Prime Minister. I don't think you understand how implausible this is. This is the upper house of Parliament that scrutinises legislation, holds the government to account, considers and reports upon public policy. I guess you could perceive it as him coming into office with one agenda, delivering it, and exiting not too long after. His character was that of the perfect candidate for it. Where is Mr. Nigel Farage? Well, upon Brexit being delivered, he stepped away from frontline politics by resigning from the Brexit Party, and the reins were taken over by Richard Tice, concurrently renaming it Reform UK. Farage has since been a media personality, prominently as a presenter on GB News, where he primarily discusses political issues, government policies, and immigration. As of June 2024, he has ascended the leader role for Reform UK in the run-up of the July UK general elections. I don't think we should blame anybody for this. Besides the small margin difference between the Remain and Leave vote, I don't think a groundbreaking decision like this should have been made. Nonetheless, the Leave vote was the winner, and the politicians merely advocated and delivered what the country voted for. Sure, the people weren't fully informed in the process of the withdrawal and adaptations. In the end, it was delivered and it's a reality. Most of the political parties avoid discussing this because 1. The Conservatives struggled negotiating and delivering this, going as far as having separations and betrayals. Secondly, the incoming party needs to clean up this mess and find a way forward. So far, it seems none truly have an outright clear solution. But let's give it time. The now former ruling Conservative Party has been voted out and only occupies 121 seats, an abysmal defeat with a loss of more than 240 seats. Its leader, Rishi Sunak's 2-year Prime Minister term, has come to an end. He had replaced Boris Johnson's successor Liz Truss, who had a catastrophic 45-day, yes, you heard me correctly, she served 45 days, marked by her £45 billion unfunded tax cut, plummeting the pound, and sharply spiking the mortgage rates. She was pressured to resign, and was succeeded by Rishi Sunak, whose Prime Minister term is now the last Conservative Party-led one. His term was marred with mixed reviews, primarily addressing the prior economic challenges and suppressing long-term sickness benefits. Despite this, many perceived him as out of touch with reality, as well as not relating to the people, mainly owing to his upbringing and wealth. To add on to that, he didn't achieve significant economic growth, with the UK's growth rate being among the lowest in the G7. After his party's loss in the election, he now heads as the opposition. The Labour Party, on the other hand, has won the election, with a 171-seat majority, now occupying 411 seats. Its leader, British politician and barrister Sir Keir Starmer, has been viewed as competent and a great opposition leader. Though, on the other hand, he has been perceived as a great critic, but lacking in solutions. He's the newly elected Prime Minister, with much hope for him to steer the country in the right direction and resolve concerns and challenges. The Liberal Democrats, led by Ed Davey, remains the third party with 72 seats. Being honest with you, though far-fetched, I thought they'd get the opposition role, with how frustrated the citizens are with the Conservatives. The highlight to the run-up of this election was certainly Nigel Farage. After all the noise he caused for the referendum to be held in 2016, to the stunt he pulled in the European Parliament in 2019, he was someone to keep an eye on, only for him and Reform UK to land 5 seats. Not horrible for a new party. He now has a sort of amplified microphone to advocate for his followers instead of just solely relying on his controversial takes on talk shows and social media. My opinion of the outcome of this election has taken the position of viewing this as indeed a new dawn for the United Kingdom. Unlike the UK, there are countries that wish to be part of the EU. Protests are transpiring in the country of Georgia, condemning a contentious media bill, which citizens fear will undermine the country's opportunity to join the European Union, as it promotes Russian law of quote-unquote foreign agents to withhold criticism of a country.
You are uncompatible for Georgia. It's our country, not you. Georgian people don't want Russia. It's a government that wants Russia. We are Europe, and we believe in Europe.
The bill would enforce media and non-commercial organizations to register as being under foreign influence if they receive more than 20% of their funding from abroad. The country is divided. A portion of politicians and oligarchs with great influence are allegedly steering the country towards allegiance with their former Soviet Union partner, Russia, whilst 80% of the citizens believe there is no country without the EU. That is our next topic, ladies and gentlemen. Do take time to join us in our investigations and feeding your curiosity. Thank you for watching.